"Don't open that door," the old man from next door said, stepping off his porch and walking straight toward me with a look I had never seen on a neighbor's face before. Not alarm, not confusion, certainty, like a man who already knew how the story ended and was trying to stop me from reading the last page. I had driven 4 hours from Charlotte to surprise my son and his wife. It was their anniversary. My wife, Adele, had flown out to see them the week before, said she needed a few extra days to help with the new house, help them settle in. I figured I'd show up unannounced, take everyone to dinner, maybe grill something in the backyard. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October, and the leaves on their street were just starting to turn. I was halfway up the front walk when the neighbor reached me. "Sir," he said, his hand going up, "I need you to step back. I already called the police. They're on their way. My name is Kenneth Briggs. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer. My whole career was about understanding what holds things together and what causes them to fail. I thought I was good at reading foundations. I was not good at reading my own family. That's my son's house," I said. "My wife is in there. What happened?" The neighbor, his name was Mr. Tatum, I'd learned later, a retired postal worker who'd lived on that street for 22 years, didn't flinch. He just looked at me with those steady eyes and said, "There was shouting, then a crash, then a woman screaming, then nothing." I stood on my porch for 30 seconds listening to the nothing, and then I called. A woman, screaming. My wife was 61. She was the kind of woman who cried at paper towel commercials and kept a prayer journal by her nightstand. The thought of her screaming was so foreign it didn't land. It just floated above me like something in a language I didn't speak. The sirens came before I could respond. 2 squad cars. Then a third. Then an ambulance rolling slow behind them like it already knew what it was coming for. The officers went to the door. I told them my wife and son were inside. My daughter-in-law, too. They told me to stay on the lawn. I didn't stay on the lawn. The front door wasn't locked. It opened on the second knock, and I was close enough behind the lead officer that I was inside before anyone told me not to be. The house smelled wrong. I don't know how else to say it. It was a new house, still had that fresh paint smell underneath everything, but over it there was something sharp, something metallic and wrong. A side table in the entry hall was knocked over. A ceramic bowl they kept their keys in had shattered on the hardwood floor. "Adele," I called out. Adele, the living room was to the left. An officer was already in the doorway, and I pushed past him, and that's when I saw her. My wife was on the floor at the base of the kitchen island. She was on her side. Her left arm was stretched out. Her reading glasses, the ones she never went anywhere without, were snapped. One lens cracked, lying 2 feet from her hand. Her eyes were closed. There was blood, not a lot, but enough, matting her silver hair just above her right ear. I made a sound I have never made in my life. It came from somewhere below language. The paramedics were behind me before I reached her. They told me not to touch her. I got down on my knees anyway, and I held her outstretched hand, and I told her I was there. I was right there. She was going to be fine. Her pulse was there, weak and unsteady, but there. While they worked on her, I stood up and I looked around the room. Really looked. The kitchen island had a deep crack in the corner of the countertop. One of the bar stools was tipped on its side. A coffee mug was shattered against the baseboard, coffee still dripping down the white wall like a slow clock. This wasn't a fall. My wife didn't fall and crack a granite countertop. My son's voice came from upstairs. "Dad." Just my name, nothing else, and then footsteps coming down fast, and he appeared at the bottom of the stairs. My son, Garrett, 34 years old, wearing a dress shirt with the collar torn and a cut across his left cheek that had dried to a dark rust color. His eyes were wide and wet, and he looked at me like a man who had been waiting for someone to come save him and didn't know if he deserved saving. "Where's your wife?" I said. My voice was very calm. That scared me more than anything else. He pointed up. I took the stairs 2 at a time. I found my daughter-in-law at the end of the hall, sitting on the floor of the master bedroom with her back against the bed, her knees pulled up, her arms wrapped around herself. She was rocking slightly. When she heard me in the doorway, she looked up and her face collapsed. "He did it," she said. Her voice was barely there. "He pushed her. He pushed Adele. I saw it. I was right there, Dad. I saw the whole thing." She always called me Dad. Had since the first Thanksgiving she spent with us. I used to love hearing it. "He pushed her down," she said again, her voice rising, her eyes bright with something that looked like grief but had a heat in it I couldn't name. "He's been so angry lately. About money. About everything. And Adele found out. She found the statements. She confronted him and he lost it." Downstairs I could hear them getting Adele onto the stretcher. I looked at my daughter-in-law's face. I looked at the tears. I looked at the way she held herself, and I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. By the time Garrett was taken in for questioning, I had already made up my mind. The officers were gentle about it, said it was standard procedure, said he wasn't under arrest. But I watched them walk my son to the cruiser and I felt something go cold in my chest that I wasn't sure would ever warm up again. My daughter-in-law rode with me to the hospital. She held my hand in the waiting room. She cried softly. She kept saying she was so sorry. She should have said something sooner. She'd known Garrett was under pressure, but she hadn't realized how bad it had gotten. He's been hiding things, she said. Financial things. I didn't know how to tell you. Adel was in surgery. Severe concussion, they said. Possible fracture at the base of the skull. They used phrases I understood structurally. Compression, pressure, hairline, and I nodded like I was reading a blueprint, because if I stopped thinking like an engineer, I was going to stop thinking entirely. A detective came by around 9 o'clock. She was a compact woman in her 40s with close-cropped hair and the kind of stillness that told you she'd heard a lot of things and sorted them into piles. Her name was Detective Aurora. Your daughter-in-law gave us a statement, she said. She says she witnessed your son push your wife during an argument about finances. Your son's account is different. What does he say? He says he didn't push her. He says he was trying to get between them. She paused. He also says your daughter-in-law has a problem. His word was addiction. I almost laughed. It came out as something else. He's trying to shift blame, I said. My son has been under financial pressure. My daughter-in-law told me he's been hiding statements. Detective Aurora looked at me evenly. Yes, she said. She did say that. We'll be looking at all of it. She closed her notebook. There's also the matter of your neighbor, Mr. Tatum. He gave a statement about what he heard. He called 911. I know, he heard more than that, she said. We'll follow up on that tomorrow. Try to get some rest, Mr. Briggs. I didn't rest. I sat in those plastic chairs and I thought about my son. Garrett had always been the quieter one. His younger sister was the loud one, the debater, the one who called home twice a week. Garrett was steady, reliable. He'd called every Sunday since he was in college, not because I asked him to, just because that was who he was. He'd married his wife 4 years ago, and she was bright and quick-witted, and I had genuinely thought, we had gotten lucky with her. I thought about the torn collar of his shirt. I thought about the cut on his cheek. Defensive wounds, I told myself. Except Adele wasn't the kind of woman who... I stopped that thought before it finished. She was the victim here. My wife was in surgery. That was the only fact that mattered. The next morning, I went back to their house to pick up some things for Adele. Her robe, her slippers, the devotional she kept on the nightstand. Small things that mattered to her. Mr. Tatum was on his porch when I pulled up. He stood when he saw me. I thanked him for calling, told him he might have saved her life. He nodded. Then he didn't go back inside. Mr. Briggs, he said, I need to tell you something. I don't think the detective believed me either. The knot that had been sitting in my stomach since the day before pulled tighter. What do you mean? He folded his hands. He was a deliberate man, Mr. Tatum. Not slow, deliberate. Like someone who chose his words the way a surgeon chooses instruments. I've lived next to that house for 22 years, he said. I knew the family that was here before your son. I know who moved in when they moved in. I know the sounds a house makes. He looked at me directly. I've been home every day for 6 months since I retired. My windows face their driveway and their kitchen window. What did you hear? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. It's not what I heard that day, he said. It's what I've heard every week for the last 4 months. He looked down at his hands. Your daughter-in-law has a voice that carries. She's not a quiet woman when she's angry. And she gets angry about money, Mr. Briggs. Very angry, very regularly. He paused. It's always her voice I hear, your son. I've heard him twice, maybe 3 times in 4 months. And when I hear him, he's always the same. He's trying to calm her down. I hear him saying, okay, let's talk about this. I hear him saying, please stop. I hear him saying her name over and over like it's the only word left. I gripped the overnight bag. The day I called, he continued, it wasn't the usual shouting. It was different, higher. Then I heard a man's voice yelling, not at a woman, but scared and urgent. He was yelling, stop it, she's hurt. And then, give me the phone. Let me call 911. Let me call them. He met my eyes. I wasn't confused about who said what. I've spent 22 years learning the acoustics of these houses. I drove away from that street and pulled over 2 blocks away and sat with the engine running for a long time. The thing about being an engineer is that you learn not to trust what you want a structure to be. You trust what the load testing tells you. You trust the data. Sentiment will get people killed. Wishful thinking will get people killed. What Mr. Tatum described was not what my daughter-in-law had described, and my son had said. She has a problem, a specific word. Not she's difficult. Not we've been arguing. He'd said addiction. I didn't go back to the hospital. Not yet. I drove to a law office I'd used once before when we sold a piece of commercial property. The attorney's name was Margaret Cho. She was sharp and unsentimental and exactly what I needed. I told her everything. I told her Adele was unconscious, that my son was a person of interest, that my daughter-in-law had given police a statement implicating him. I told her I needed to understand the financial picture. I told her that as Adele's husband, I needed to protect her interests and my son's until we knew the truth. Margaret looked at me for a long moment and said, give me 48 hours. She called me back in 26. Come in, she said. No pleasantries. I sat across from her in that same chair where I'd once signed papers for a building in uptown Charlotte. She slid a folder across the desk. The joint checking account your son and daughter-in-law share had $37,000 in it 14 months ago, she said. It currently has $412. She opened the folder and turned it toward me. Every withdrawal over $500 was made from a mobile device registered to your daughter-in-law, many of them in the early morning hours between 2 and 4 a.m. I looked at the statements. Dozens of transactions, sites with names that didn't hide what they were, online casinos, sports betting platforms. Your son's salary was direct deposited every 2 weeks, Margaret continued, without exception. He was not the one withdrawing. I put my hand flat on the table because the room felt like it was tilting. There's more, she said. Your daughter-in-law opened a credit card in your son's name 14 months ago. He didn't know. She maxed it at $11,000. She also, and this is the part you really need to hear, she filed a change of address on a piece of certified mail from the mortgage company. It was rerouted to a P.O. box. Your son didn't know they were 3 months behind on the mortgage until 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I said. The same week your wife flew out to visit. The room went very quiet. Your wife didn't just come out to help them settle in, Margaret said. I pulled her email. She gave me access through the power of attorney paperwork you signed. She emailed your son 6 days before she flew out. She told him she was worried. She said your daughter-in-law had called her crying, saying she needed help, that Garrett was out of control, that she was scared of what he might do. My wife had been summoned, not invited, summoned, by a woman who needed her to come before Garrett could tell us the truth himself. I remember my son's voice from 2 Sundays before Adele flew out. He'd called like always. He'd sounded tired. When I asked, he said he wasn't sleeping well. I asked if everything was okay. He said, Dad, I'm trying to handle something. I'll call you next week. I hadn't pushed. I thought he meant work. I drove straight to the hospital. Adele was still unconscious, but the doctors said the pressure had stabilized, that she might wake within the next day. I sat beside her bed and held her hand and told her I was sorry for the 4 hours it had taken me to stop being a fool. My daughter-in-law was in the family waiting area when I came out. She stood when she saw me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She opened her arms slightly, the way she always did when she expected a hug. I stopped 6 feet away. I need you to tell me the truth, I said. Something shifted in her face. Just a flicker. The way a light goes unsteady when something in the wiring is wrong. I have been telling you the truth, she said. Her voice was soft and careful. The credit card, I said. The one in Garrett's name that you opened. The softness didn't vanish all at once. It retreated, slowly like a tide going out, and what was underneath was something I hadn't seen before. Not grief, not shame, something harder and colder and very awake. He knew about that card, she said. The bank says he didn't. Banks make mistakes. The mortgage payments, I said. The rerouted mail. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she sat down. She laced her fingers together in her lap, and when she looked up at me again, she was a different person than the one who had held my hand in the waiting room. You want to believe him, she said. That's what this is. He's your son. I get it. But think about what you're doing, Ken. You're about to defend a man who put your wife in a hospital bed. He didn't put her there, I said. My voice was quiet. She shook her head slowly, a small, sad smile. This is what he does. He gets to people. He got to you. He got to Miss Tatum next door. Did he talk to you? Did Garrett put him up to that? Mr. Tatum called 911 before anyone talked to anyone. He's an old man, she said. Old men get confused. He spent 22 years with those houses, I said. He knows who does the yelling. She stood up. Her composure was remarkable. I'll give her that. She stood up straight, and she looked at me the way someone looks at a problem they've already solved. I'm going to tell you something, she said, dropping her voice. Your son has been under investigation by his company's compliance department for the last 3 months. Did you know that? An internal review of expenses filed under client entertainment. If this goes the way I think it goes, your family is going to need someone the board doesn't already know about. You want to burn me right now? Go ahead. But I am the only one in this situation who is still thinking clearly. I had not known about any compliance review, and for exactly 4 seconds, the doubt she was counting on crept in through the gap she'd opened. Then I thought about the early morning withdrawals. 2 a.m., 3:17 a.m., 4 a.m. I thought about the mortgage notices rerouted to a P.O. box. I thought about a woman who called my wife crying and frightened and scared of what her husband might do, and then waited for my wife to walk into the house, and then called the police after the fact and pointed the finger before the blood was even dry. I thought about my son standing at the bottom of those stairs with a torn collar and a cut on his face that nobody had explained. You're very good at this, I said. She didn't answer. But there are bank records, I said. There are IP addresses. There are timestamps. And there is a retired man next door who has been home every single day for 6 months and has no reason in this world to lie for my son. She picked up her purse. I hope you know what you're doing, Ken. For the first time since yesterday, I said, I think I do. Detective Aurora arrested my daughter-in-law 48 hours later. The charges were aggravated assault and filing a false police report. Margaret had handed over every bank record. The detective's own team had already been building the same picture from a different angle. What they had that I didn't were the security cameras from the gas station across from the branch where my daughter-in-law had opened the fraudulent credit card. Her face, her car, her date and time. And what Margaret had that clinched it was a text message chain between my daughter-in-law and a friend, sent 3 days before Adele flew in. I won't repeat all of it, but one message said, "Garrett told his dad everything this weekend. I can't let that happen. I need his mom here first. She'll believe me." She had arranged it. She had gotten Adele into that house deliberately before Garrett could make one more phone call to me. And when Adele found the mortgage notices, because my wife had gone looking, because my wife was not a woman who stayed in guest rooms and minded her business, there had been a confrontation. Not between Garrett and Adele. Between my daughter-in-law and Adele. And when Adele said she was calling me, my daughter-in-law had shoved her into the edge of the kitchen island, and then walked upstairs, arranged herself on the floor of the bedroom, and waited for the sirens. Garrett hadn't even been in the kitchen. He'd been outside. He'd come in through the back door after hearing the crash and found his mother on the floor and his wife already on the phone with 911 describing what he'd done. He hadn't run. He hadn't fled. He'd called 911 himself, a second call, while she was still on with them, and told them his wife needed an ambulance and that he hadn't touched her and please come fast. That call was in the record. Nobody had mentioned it to me. My son's compliance review turned out to be nothing. A procedural audit, the kind that happens every year in financial services companies. It had already been closed before any of this happened. She'd found out about it months earlier and filed it away as ammunition for exactly the right moment. Adele came out of the coma on a Thursday afternoon. I was there. Garrett was there. She opened her eyes and the first thing she said in a voice like sand was my name, just my name. And then she looked at Garrett and she reached out her hand. He took it. And he put his forehead down on the edge of the mattress and he cried the way a man cries when he's been holding something. For so long his arms have gone numb. I didn't touch either of them. I just stood at the foot of the bed and I let the moment be what it was. Later, when the doctors had come and gone and Garrett had stepped out to call his sister, I sat next to Adele and I told her what had happened, all of it. The bank records, Mr. Tatum, the text messages, the whole architecture of it, load-bearing walls and all. She was quiet for a long time. I knew something was wrong, she said finally. Not with Garrett, with her. I knew at the moment I walked into that kitchen and saw her face when I picked up the mortgage notice. It wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. She closed her eyes. It was calculation. She was already thinking ahead. "You should have called me," I said. "I was going to." She paused. "I just didn't get the chance. There was something else I needed to say. I'd been turning it over for 3 days, the shape of my own failure. I had walked into that hospital, seen my daughter-in-law's tears, heard her voice break, and I had decided. Before any evidence, before any question, I had decided because she was crying and my son was standing there with a torn collar, and that was close enough to a picture I already knew how to read. I had spent 31 years studying how things fail. Bridges, buildings, foundations. I knew that the cracks you miss are always the ones right in front of you, the ones you've already decided aren't cracks. I told Adele that. She looked at me with those tired eyes and she said, "Kenneth, you were scared. You saw me on that floor and you were scared and you believed the person who handed you a reason. That's not a character flaw. That's grief doing what grief does." "I should have waited," I said. "Yes," she said simply. "But you didn't and now you know. That's worth something." The trial was 6 months later. I won't dwell on it. The defense tried to paint Garrett as controlling, tried to suggest the financial chaos was a shared dysfunction, tried to make the bank records ambiguous. They weren't ambiguous. Timestamps are not ambiguous. IP addresses are not ambiguous. Mr. Tatum testified. He wore a suit and he sat in that witness box like a man who had done harder things and would do harder things still, and he told the jury exactly what he had told me on his porch. Simply, clearly, without drama. The kind of testimony that doesn't need to perform because it's just true. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. She was convicted on both counts, 14 years. I sat in that courtroom and watched them take her out, and I didn't feel what I expected to feel. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel relief. I felt the specific tired sadness of watching something fail that didn't have to fail. A structure that had been compromised from the inside, long before anyone thought to look. Adele's recovery took 8 months. She relearned some things. Her balance was off for a long time, a slight hesitation when she moved from one surface to another, a thing you'd only notice if you'd watched her walk every day for 35 years. She came back to herself slowly, like a house settling after a foundation repair. You could feel the solidity returning. Garrett moved back to Charlotte 6 weeks after the trial. His company had offered him a lateral transfer, and he took it. He lives 12 minutes from us now. He comes for dinner on Sundays. We don't talk about her much. There's not a lot to say that the silence doesn't already hold. What I think about, when I allow myself to think about it, is the neighbor, Mr. Tatum. A man I had never met before that October afternoon. A man with no stake in our family, no obligation, no angle. He could have stayed on his porch. He could have called 911 and gone back inside and let the professionals sort it out. Instead, he walked across a yard to stop a stranger from walking into something he needed to know was coming. And then, when nobody believed him, he stayed. He came to me. He told me what he'd heard, knowing I might not listen, knowing I was already halfway into the story my grief was writing for me. I went back to see him after the verdict, brought him a bottle of good bourbon and sat on his porch for an hour, and we talked about nothing much, the way men do when the important thing has already been said. His wife had passed 8 years before. He had a daughter in Phoenix he called twice a week. He watched a lot of baseball. At one point he said, "You know, I almost didn't come out that day. I thought it's not my business. Then I thought about my wife, about what I'd want a neighbor to do." I told him he was a good man. He waved that off the way good men always do. There's a thing I've started saying to people when they ask how we're doing now, because people always ask how you're doing after something like this. I tell them we're building, not rebuilding. Building. Rebuilding suggests you're trying to restore what was there before. We're not. What was there before had cracks in it we hadn't found yet. We're building something new, something we've tested properly, something we actually know the load capacity of. Adele laughs when I put it that way. She says I'm still an engineer even when I'm trying to be a philosopher. She's not wrong. Last Sunday, Garrett sat at our kitchen table for 3 hours after dinner. He'd brought a case file he was working on, and Adele read while he worked, and I fixed a drawer that had been sticking since spring, and nobody said anything for long stretches, and it was the most peaceful evening I can remember in years. That kind of quiet is hard-won. You don't get it by accident. You get it by surviving something that tried to take it from you, and choosing every day after to protect it. Before you go, I want to ask you something. If you'd been standing on that lawn, if a neighbor had walked toward you with that look on his face and tried to stop you from going inside, would you have listened? Would you have slowed down long enough to hear him out? Or would you have pushed past him the way I pushed past the officers? Too certain, too afraid, too sure you already knew the story? Tell me in the comments. And if this reached you, if any part of it felt true, please subscribe. There are more of these stories, and every one of them is about the same thing. The moment you find out that what you thought was solid wasn't, and what you decide to do next.